So,
All right.
welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have you join us tonight and appreciate your patience with the technology. This is a webinar format, so it's just a little different than a regular Zoom meeting. The plan is to have the panel discussion and then about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions. If you would please use the Q&A button to enter your questions, that's a little easier to monitor, and then use the chat for conversation with each other. This will be recorded. And to start off, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how tonight happened. Barry Kudrowitz, who is a faculty member in product design, shared an email that he had received from Chris Way, and we soon realized that we actually have a lot of alums with connections to the shoe industry. And so we reached out, and with great enthusiasm, we were able to pull together tonight's panel, and we hope that you enjoy. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Wilson, who is another product design faculty who will ask the questions, and I'm going to work on getting Ben to join the group.
All right. Hi, everybody. So glad you could join us. We apologize. We're not technical pros, but we'll get through it together. So again, thank you to all our panelists, Charlie, Chris, Susan, Ashley, and Ben is hopefully going to join us soon. So let's see. We've got a lot of interested people online here waiting to hear about you. So could each of you maybe just give us the brief bio of kind of who you are, where you work currently, and where you are, and all that sort of fun stuff. Ashley, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Ashley Damian. I live in Minneapolis, and I work for Target as a senior shoe designer for designing women's shoes. And
you've been there how long?
Oh yeah, I've been there for 7 years. And before that, I lived in New York and worked for Bass Footwear for 4 years.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Chris.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Huey. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I originally grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to the University of Minnesota from 2008 to 2012. I was actually a business major from Carlson, so please don't boo me. But I was part of CDES through a design minor, and that's kind of how I got introduced to all these great people. And then upon graduating in 2012, I moved out to Portland to join the Adidas America team, where I've been part of this brand for the last 9 years.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Charlie.
Yeah, I'm Charlie Kirihara. I'm a color and materials designer for American football at Adidas. I've been with the brand for about 5.5 years. Went to the U and studied graphic design and just tried to make all of my projects about shoes as much as I could. And came out to Portland a few times during school, got connected with Chris through the U, and he helped me make some connections at Adidas, and had made some connections at Nike as well. But then after graduating from the U, I took a class at Pensole Footwear Design Academy out here in Portland, and then got a job at Adidas shortly after.
Terrific. Susan.
Hi there, I'm Susan Sokolowski. I am a graduate from the U as well, and I studied apparel design and kinesiology. And I live out in Portland, Oregon as well. And I originally worked at Nike for about 20 years in product innovation. And now more recently, I'm at the University of Oregon, where I'm the director of a new sports product design master's degree program here.
Awesome. And Ben, how are you?
I'm here. Hi, I'm Ben Krause, graduate of the University of Minnesota, member of the first ever industrial design or product design class. Currently in the Boston area. I'm an industrial designer at a company called Gemline. I design bags there, but I'm here because I had an internship at Timberland like year and a half ago. And I spent a year there designing footwear. Just sort of at later in my product design career, I realized I was obsessed with shoes and drew them and sent those drawings to people until someone gave me an internship.
Good advice. All right, thank you, everybody. So let's dig into some of the questions we've got here. So we have a really, really amazing variety of backgrounds here. You guys just shared with us. We have folks from apparel, graphic design, industrial or product design, marketing, etc. It seems clear, at least from this group, that you can get into shoe design from many different educational paths. In terms of other designers you've met and known, what types of backgrounds are people in shoe design usually from? And do you think there's any sort of ideal educational background for shoe design? And I'll take anyone who wants to take a shot at that.
I'll go ahead and go first, only because I think I'm a big advocate of, and an example of someone who didn't follow a traditional career path. Similar to many people on this call, I grew up loving sneakers. It's all I ever wanted to do professionally, but I doubted that you could. Maybe that was just the result of growing up in Wisconsin and not thinking people got paid to design shoes, or at least not me. I didn't think I was special enough. But similar to other people, like I was able to just be passionate about it, follow it. And now to what Jim said, I've had the opportunity to work with and also hire people from kind of all walks of life. So even just on the small team that I oversee here in Portland, we have a designer who grew up working at skate shops and sneaker shops, never even got a college degree. We have someone who's a graphic designer, and we have someone who comes from like mathematics and economics. So I think part of that is a reflection of the product we work on. We're not building like highly technical, innovation product. We're building fashion and lifestyle products. So for me, it's far more important that people understand the culture and the consumer and storytelling. But also I think it's a reflection of how modern companies are recruiting. Like the best way I'd put it is we're not necessarily looking to hire employees. We're looking to hire really cool and good people. And I think since you spend so much time as a group, having well-rounded candidates, not just necessarily educated or experienced candidates, it is far more important to us moving forward. So yeah, totally my experience. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I just think ultimately, similar to what I think you'll hear through the panel, like your intrinsic love and passion for the industry is what's going to shine through and allow you to succeed.
Awesome, thank you. Susan, you've been in the business for a while. What have you seen in terms of backgrounds and the folks you've worked with?
Well, I think for me, like it was a low-hanging fruit opportunity because I had an original background in apparel design and anthropometry. And I was always really curious about the interface of products and athletic performance. And I happened upon footwear and realized that one, no one was really teaching designers how to do footwear, especially with a performance lens. Like I was very interested in the body and improving the body. And so I always had this question of like, well, how do we take what we know about apparel design and apply it to footwear? How do we take all those great things about understanding the body and bringing it to footwear? And so my experience was that when I entered the industry, most of the designers that I worked with were not only just male, they were also industrial designers. And my experience was that most of those designers weren't trained in understanding the body. So when I came in, I not only had incredible making skills from my apparel background, but I also knew a lot about materials and how to make them, and also knew about the body. So what we're seeing now in the sneaker culture is that designers are being hired with multidisciplinary backgrounds because of that knowledge base they bring in. But I think historically, even going way back, the original designers were architects, right? So not even touching the body at all, really looking at external environments. So we went from architects to industrial designers, and now I think we are seeing really great diversity and talent, and that's really going to drive better innovation.
Mhm. Awesome. Let me ask something here, and this is something that my product design students, I have a number of sneakerheads, and I think this idea of coming at something from both a beautiful item as well as one that's obviously built on great performance is really key. So like in terms of that idea of bringing together things that are both beautiful and high performance, what kind of challenges have you guys faced in making something that does both of those things at the same time? And what role does the designer play? Are there trade-offs? Are you working with engineers? How does the process work, and how do you make something that works great and looks amazing? Charlie, what do you think?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think, part of the challenge is we're working with physical product, and we're working with things that aren't digital, things that you can touch and feel and put on. And so part of the battle is we have to make things that are compelling on the shelf or online that people are going to see and say, I want to try that on, and I want to at least give that a go before I buy it. And so you have to be able to draw people in. It's why designs for shoes are typically done of the lateral view, because that's the shelf out view. That's the view that you see on websites. And so that's very important, but that it's also important that once somebody puts that product on, that they have a good experience in that. And so, I think it depends on your discipline. If you're a footwear designer versus a graphic designer or color material designer, whatnot, when you are working on the shoe, I can't necessarily dictate the fit and form as much as a footwear designer might, but I can embellish it with things. I can put things on the sock liner. I can add details in that make somebody feel like they're getting something special and something that's more than what they would expect. I think we're always trying to improve that and just really think too, what is the purpose of this shoe? Is it for fashion, or is it for function, or is it for both? And that can kind of define how you design it.
Interesting. Great. Ashley, what about over at Target and in your past experience?
Yeah, I would say like the one, so I forgot to mention, I graduated from the apparel program in, I think 2009, maybe, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And I will say the one thing that really, I got into the footwear industry through an apparel designer that I was interning at. She actually had a collaboration with a footwear brand, Bass Shoes, and that's how they had a job opening, and that's how I got an interview there. But the one thing that really just captivated me about footwear design was the technical elements of it, that I think, in apparel design, we do learn a lot about that. But to be a footwear designer, you do have to understand how people walk in the shoe, how they're going to use the shoe, those type of things in order to design a great shoe. So I think that's part. I'm not a technical designer. We have technical designers that we are partners with at Target, but just kind of knowing those technical aspects of performance, I think helps you design a better shoe, or think through kind of the elements of, to Charlie's point, what is it for? Is it for fashion? Is it for performance? What are those elements? So that's what I would say.
Is to continue on that point, in some industries, the designer will do a lot of work and then kind of throw things over the wall to the technical or the engineer. What has been your experience?
I always like having a very strong partnership with my technical designer. I think when we both bring ideas to the table, we kind of come up with a great spot. So that's always been my approach.
Amazing. Awesome. That's great. So I'm going to ask this of Ben. He's the newest person out there in the field. So Ben, in terms of the role you have at Gemline, as well as the role you had at Timberline, what are some of the constraints in your role that you never thought about while you were in school? So how has this really differed as you've gotten out there?
the biggest game changer for me is the horrible adult world of money. Once you have to design products for companies, they generally want to make a profit on things. So that whole like cost engineering and designing for a price and sort of maximizing, giving the consumer the most you can for your dollar it has like definitely been the newest in terms of design challenges. But it adds a whole like fun new layer to that design challenge, and like that's why I do design as a whole. It's like it's not always easy, and you got to figure out those important parts and key features and where you can really add value while also keeping value for the other stakeholders.
Right. Yeah, constraints actually make better designs. Sometimes it's hard to believe that, but anyone else have thoughts on that in terms of, you know, some of the constraints you might face at your organization that maybe you haven't seen elsewhere?
I can give my perspective. So I think everything Ben brought up is spot on, and something unique to my role, at least at Adidas and our footwear design team, is that we oversee what I would just broadly call cultural partnerships. So we work with musicians, we work with sneaker boutiques, we work with like lifestyle brands and up and coming designers. And I think from the outside, when I was a consumer, I always viewed those as like the coolest thing. Like everyone loves collaboration products. Like, wow, how great it must be to work with this person, that person. And I can kind of see Charlie smirking because I think he's had similar experiences. Like sometimes those are also the most challenging products. And the constraints that can come from that is, for example, if you work with a musician, the way they create is dramatically different than the way a global footwear brand brings product to market. They can stay up all night in the studio, make a product, put it on Spotify, and it's done. And their expectation for the speed of decision making, the speed of prototyping, the speed of going to market is dramatically different than how we work. And also, a lot of people, you know, whether it's an entertainer, a designer, or a musician, they've gotten their success because they have ultimate confidence in themselves. But as a result, they want full support. And when you're working with people who every project to them is the most important thing, but you're spread out, you really have to find that interpersonal relationship of how you speak to other creatives or other designers in a way, still from a point of, I represent the brand, I am the expert at my role, but I hear you, I'm incorporating your feedback, and this is how we're going to work towards a right way forward. So that's a big part of my job, is finding polite ways to say, not necessarily no, but yes, how about this? And
Right.
It's something I never really considered as I went into design. I was always just so focused on the creative element of it, but honestly, at least on the business side of it, there's a lot of that interpersonal skill that factors into your success as well.
Exactly. You just about answered our next question, but I'm going to see what Susan has to say about this, maybe from a Nike perspective. How do the business and design sides of this industry work together, or what have you seen?
Yeah, so in the footwear industry or in the sports industry, we call it the product triad, which tends to be your product merchandiser or your PLM, developer and designer. Those are like your key partners. And so it is teamwork. And so companies are looking for designers that can come in and understand how to work with a team, how to, you know, understand what the business needs are, how to read briefs, how to design for other users instead of themselves, which I think is often a thing that students do in college. They often design for themselves. And what we are really doing is designing for customers and market and price points. And so I think those are really important things as being part of the team. And sometimes you have to sacrifice design for, you know, getting something done, or time, or sometimes you'll work on something where folks want to move it forward faster because they're excited about it. So there's a lot of like surprises. And I think you have to be very nimble and you have to be a really good partner and in order to be successful. The relationships are sometimes more important than the talent.
Well,
Yeah.
well put.
I think just to kind of jump off of that, it's for me, it'd be one thing to have the trust of the rest of the designers on the team that I work with, but that's only going to get you so far because you can't, like, if it was just design making things, I don't know, the world would go sideways, but you have to earn the trust of your coworkers, and that'll go far and beyond in your career. The more that you can convince your coworkers to trust you and show that you can do the work and show that they should believe in you, and the more that you can develop those relationships, I think at the end of the day, the happier you're going to be, and the more that you're going to see that true creative, the design work that you want to see done because it's right for the consumer. Without those relationships in marketing, in development, in communications, in sports marketing, so on and so forth, you're just going to be somebody that has renderings on a wall, and you need those partners. And I think also what Chris was saying too, it's about identifying what type of partner is this, if it is a collaboration, because Chris saw I was smirking because it's like, you know, before we were in the industry, we're like, that's the coolest stuff, that's the stuff I want to work on, and then you work on it and you're like, oh man, I'm just here to be a technical designer and listen to their vision and so on and so forth. But I think it's the more experience you get in working through some of those things, you figure out that partner. And some partners, in my experience, like a Jalen Ramsey wants to be hands-on, and if he knew how to use Illustrator, he would do the CADs himself. Somebody like Juju Smith-Schuster or Patrick Mahomes are a lot more hands-off, and they just want to understand the vision and the direction, but they'll trust you. And so you have to figure out what kind of relationship is this, and play to the best of everybody's abilities.
Outstanding. I hope we have lots of students listening, because I think this was very, very good commentary. Susan, in terms of all of that, kind of describing how the process works, at least most of the time, if not ideally, you've had a lot of work in innovation. How do you kind of get off of that track of making the next product and kind of invest that time into something, you know, a little deeper and a little further out there?
Yeah, so in the footwear industry and in the sport company sort of realm, the larger companies actually divide that work up. So for example, at Nike, you will have what are called inline teams, and inline teams are working on seasonal product, and there are inline designers that work on those teams to get products, you know, done in 18, 24 months. Then there are designers that work purely on innovation, and those designers are working 3 to 5 years out. And in some cases, there's an in-between where there'll be sort of like inline innovation designers where they're building on inline products, but they have kind of some of their work carved out to work in innovation. And so sometimes that would be like low-hanging fruit innovation, or things that maybe they've been working on, you know, like a longer period of time that aren't as time bound.
Cool. That's awesome. Terrific. So a couple of big topics in the design world would include wearable technology, health and wellness, sustainability. Ashley, can you tell us anything about how you see these fitting into the shoe business? And if you can, tell us what Target is doing to address some of these things.
Well, I'll just, you know, this past year, we were kind of just talking, like, we've been at home, working at home for the past year, you know, so I think it has pushed a lot of us to work more in a digital space, we were probably more in a physical space than we were in digital, even though technology was there, I would say. We weren't 100 like pushed there. So I will say it has been good to kind of, from a sampling and sustainability standpoint, kind of move to more of a digital space when working through designs and kind of talking through how do we work more upfront digitally. So I think that's been really great and kind of exciting to work more in 3D and stuff like that. That has kind of pushed us there.
Cool. What about Adidas? Anything we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think any of the global brands, whether it's Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, Target, Timberland, like we're always tackling so many things at once. But for sure, out of the different fields you listed, sustainability is really the sharpest point of our brand. So we have quite a few different programs. I mean, we just announced by 2025, I believe, they want 9 out of every 10 products to hit an internal sustainability standard. Today, what that means is that, at least for footwear, your product by weight has to meet a certain percentage of recycled content to be branded as recycled. And even within Adidas, not to get too technical, we have different levels. So it's kind of like bronze, silver, gold of just how sustainable your products are. And I also want to set it clear, like we're building consumer goods. Any new shoe is contributing to part of the problem. So it's definitely not solving sustainability, but we are trying to lessen our impact. And probably the pinnacle expression of that from our brand today is we have a model or a silhouette that is basically made to be remade. That's the tagline. So it's a upper textile that's made of TPU content, and it's got a midsole that's also TPU. So basically a type of plastic compound. And this shoe looks like a technical running shoe, performs like a technical running shoe. It comes with a QR code. You register it. When you're done with it, you send it back to Adidas. The upper is separated from the midsole. Those are shredded independently, reground and repurposed into new footwear. So it's what we'd call a circular loop of sustainability. It's really, I would say, the first of its kind at a large commercial scale. I cannot comment on how many we've actually remade, but I also would say sometimes the ambition is just as important as the execution at this point, and we're going to continue to evolve and perfect that process along the way. So yes, sustainability, especially for my brand and my employer, is like the number one kind of cultural factor that we're really building against.
Great. Oh, that's really, really good stuff. Awesome. So Ben, you've been at Timberland and now you're working on a lot of soft goods. What areas of expertise do you find yourself working with in addition to designers? It was mentioned that in school, it's like designers talking to designers. What's it like in your world?
At least, so at Timberland, it was a bigger company, so there's better variety. But it was definitely the roles of like materials teams. What were doing super cool stuff because they got to work on like more sustainable materials, cutting edge, like cool tech that you could then integrate into your design essentially. So it was just sort of like people in roles that got really specific and really deep and really good at what they did. And so there were materials teams, there were color and trend teams. There's one woman at Timberland that her job was leather. Like she knew it, like every animal you could make leather out of, and even ones you couldn't, she could tell you about that leather. So like roles that got super into the weeds like that were awesome and very inspirational. And you could kind of go to them as a designer and be like, how do I do this? What's something interesting or inspiring that then would like challenge you to push that? I know there were definitely innovations within materials in particular to just like attack sustainability in different ways, whether it was recycled materials or reusable, or you go the other side and it's just a product that's going to last forever. And it was really cool working, sort of combining that with then maybe the development team and the product engineers that could then help you to build that product. in the best way possible, and really sort of combining those more specified skill sets rather than a designer trying to take on all of those roles at once.
Right, right. So cool. And to follow up on that, from either Ben or anybody else, what does prototyping look like in this business in terms of creating shoes? And do they just have to look like something? Do they have to be wearable? How does that work, and what's your role in it?
For me, from my experience, the normal footwear development was we'd send like basic specs. We'd call them CADs. It wasn't CAD, it was whatever. You'd send a spec over to China and you would get back pullover. We call them pullover samples. And it would you would go through stages of refining that design, and it would often come back. The first round could be kind of ugly and like things are getting weird, but you gradually shape it and mold it into the shoe you want to be. But we also had a couple really cool opportunities, and I know Timberland has been really pushing their in-house prototyping, which was awesome. I actually posted on my Instagram today, if you want to go follow there. Like we had a prototyping session where we went to the innovation center and they just had like a bunch of pieces of old shoes, and it was about cobbling these things together, and you build a shoe and like try it on and see parts that fit. And that really led to some of the most interesting and exciting designs where you really moved beyond the 2D and the digital.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What about Target or Adidas or Nike?
Charlie, I'll let you go first. And then I'll go.
Yeah, I think, when you see the exploded view of a shoe, of the next model that came out, that's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's a lot of marketing to say this is how we came up across this. When you all make it in this industry, you'll see how ugly shoes can look at the beginning stages, and they're in random materials and random colors, and nothing really makes sense, and you have to find ways to look beyond that thing that's all these crazy colors, and really look at the bones of what you've received. Yeah, it's iterative. It can be rapid. Typically in a pre-COVID world, we would go to the factory once a year on a development trip, and we could hand off tech packs one night, and then we show up at the factory the next morning, and all the shoes are sitting there, and they're like, they want to go over every single thing. Now it's a little bit different, and we're not at the factories, and so it's just been a different type of challenge. Things take a little bit more time. It takes time to get things from the factory, that because we're not there, it takes a little bit longer. But I think, another thing to mention, and something that Susan was touching on, is there are teams that work on inline things that are 18 to 24 months out, but there are teams like Chris's team that's working on, Chris, I don't even know the shortest deadline that you're on, but it's like a 6-month calendar, and you're kind of starting at 75% to get to 100% versus 0 to get to 100.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just say with Bass and with Target, it's kind of similar for me, but in terms of the process, I was taught at Bass like how to hand sketch, so I still hand sketch, which I know some people don't do any, but yeah, so I was taught. So I still do a lot of hand sketching, and it's usually reviewing a lot of just like initial ideas. I mean, similar to how you would present initial college. I think here are all my ideas, every possible thing, that you've kind of thought through, getting feedback on that, probably doing another round of sketching, then doing it in Illustrator. And then usually that's when we would move to like tech packs, where we would work with our technical designer and kind of start building the tech pack of what the prototype would look like. I would say at Bass, I went overseas 4 times a year to review prototypes in factories. So it's definitely what I did, but prototypes, to what everybody says, sometimes they're very surprising and don't always execute as you had thought. But I feel like there's never been a prototype where I'm like, oh, we can't get there. Like, just a little bit more clarity on what the vision was maybe needed up front. So,
well, prototypes aren't meant to be perfect. So. Awesome. Susan, you've had a great career, and in fact, done a couple things in your career. What would you suggest a career track might look like for someone in shoe design? I mean, will they just keep designing shoes for 20 or more years, or are there supervising positions, or do they move into other categories? How might it look for someone entering the field?
Yeah, I think it depends. There are what we call in the industry, there's individual contributor roles, and there's sort of like leadership roles at a company. And I would say there isn't like one role for everybody, because sometimes designers prefer to design. And then there are sometimes designers that want to design and lead, right? Or there are people like myself that are like, I'm going to try something new. So I'm going to like move from this to that and keep learning and, you know, innovating in different spaces. So I think you really have to understand how you work, what you love to do, because there may be parts about the design industry that you don't like doing. Like even with our students, or even when I worked as a professional, some people are really great at CAD, some people aren't, some people are really great at materials, right? So it's like really finding what you're really strong at doing, and then really figuring out how you're going to monopolize that to be known for what you are doing in your field, and really taking that and seeing how you can play with it for your next step in your career. Because, you know, work's hard, right? There are so many things that you're doing on a job and juggling, and so you really should try to find something that you love doing.
Awesome.
I will also just add to that, like there are different, like when I worked for Bassett, I had a director and me, and that was the team, 2 of us, and we did the whole, you know, collection together. Now I work for Target. It's a much bigger corporate team. There are many, many people on my team. So I would just say there's also different kind of working teams that like you also need to find what kind of industry or team that you like working with and what makes you thrive as a designer. Is it a very large team, lots of partners and lots of collaboration, or just, you know, a very small team like it was at Bass for me? So
that's great comment. I think for our students and younger folks to know that, you know, finding that right fit, it's not just all about the skills, it's about finding, you know, an organization where you feel at home and where you can grow kind of the direction you want to grow, not what someone tells you to do. Awesome. So who of you had internships in the footwear industry, and how did you arrive at your current job? Charlie.
So I didn't have a traditional internship in the footwear industry. I think Pensole is kind of an internship. I mean, it's without a employer, but it's a bridge between college and professional. I think, yeah, that was a focus of mine. I'm sure most people on the call are familiar with toy product design, but that was again, not really an internship, but I think that's like the closest experience in school that I had to what real life is like, because you don't work on a team with all designers, you work on a team with many disciplines and backgrounds, and the more that you can communicate and get the best out of each person, the better off you'll be. And I think what I would say on internships is it's not the end all be all. We've had interns in our group that have not been good at all, and we've had great interns. It's you know, sometimes people make it past the recruitment phase and they have a good enough portfolio and can speak on themselves well enough that they can make it in, and then they are in, and it goes interestingly for them. But don't feel like you have to have an internship to break into this industry, because there are many, many other ways.
Cool.
yeah, I'll just say I interned for New York designer Rachel Antonoff, and she had a collaboration with Bass Shoes. And when I went to the interview, I knew that I I didn't know how to sketch a shoe. Like I knew that you know, my skills were not there, but I had done so much research on the company. I knew their like top 5 styles by name, right? I could reference a lot of things, just like the history of the company, what they were known for, directionally what they had in their assortment at that season. So I think just knowing kind of if you don't have a lot of skills, like just sketching shoes, like I could still show some apparel CADs and things like that would transfer. But I tried to bring a lot of that like excitement around the brand and knowing who the customer was to the interview. And I think that's how I got the internship or the assistant designer position, because I was just so interested in the company. And actually asked my director, you know, why she hired me, because I knew that she was interviewing people with footwear degrees like out of FIT. And she said, I really saw that you wanted to learn, and I really felt like I could teach you something. And I think that having an interest in the company and interest in footwear, it really shows in an interview, and just kind of bringing that to any kind of internship that you're really excited about. Really, yeah.
That's terrific.
I will just share mine because I think it could be good for students to learn as well, or to hear. I'll make it quick because I know we're short on time, but the way I got to Adidas was I was customizing or hand making sneakers. Charlie actually did the same thing. And it was for me a way to make the shoes that I couldn't afford. Like that's how I initially started it. But that kind of got me some internet notoriety. And even though I was too naive to realize it, I was flying, you know, I was earning money by selling these custom shoes. I was taking that money to go to different sneaker releases and events, and I was meeting all these people. And it's an incredibly passionate and tight-knit industry, and those connections kind of follow you for life, especially if they're genuine and you come from a place of love and real interest. So I was making these custom sneakers. I had taken a full-time position in a marketing role, and an Adidas recruiter reached out to me because she found my work either online or whatever, and she offered me a senior designer position. And I was like a junior in college. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, let's go. Of course, I talked to her. I'm like, hey, I'm not ready to be a senior designer. You know, let's try and make an internship work. So I basically forego my full-time secure job to go take a 10-week internship, move to Portland, a place I've never been. Don't have a car. I'm riding my bike to work every day. And like halfway through my internship, they're like, dude, you got to stay. Like, this isn't just an internship, like come on board. But it was within marketing. It wasn't within footwear design. So while I was in marketing, I continued to make custom sneakers, and so much so to the point that I had made a design that basically gathered more attention that really I should have or wanted to. And times were a little bit different back then, but it kind of ruffled some feathers at the top. Long story short, I had to meet with our creative director. So I'm like a 25-year-old low-ranking marketing employee, and I'm not in product creation. I'm in merchandising. And I'm meeting with our creative director, and he's kind of grilling me like, dude, what are you doing? Like you're kind of ruining our plans here by building shoes that we could easily take to market. And I'm like, well, hey, why don't I just do it professionally? Like that's what I've always wanted to do. I just need the opportunity. And we kind of had this like standoff, I remember, in his office, and I felt super intimidated, but I was like, I got to stand my ground. And a few weeks later, the offer did come. I could basically restart my career, move out of a profession in marketing, and take an entry-level role in footwear design. And I was like 1000% yes, absolutely doing it. And basically never looked back. And I guess my lesson from that story is, and kind of my theme of what I keep speaking to is, if you are genuine, if you're a good person, if this is what you love to do, and you continue to meet people along the way who will be advocates for you, it's going to make it so much easier than just trying to sit behind a screen and perfect your portfolio or work on your sketching. Like, this is an industry of people and ideas, and finding that balance is just as important as your technical skills.
That's terrific. Awesome. Thank you, guys. We could go on and on. I think we're going to take a few questions from our attendees here. Ben, maybe you want to get this one since you're the newest grad. What did you find from school that was really valuable in your career and as you transition to the working world? We all know that you learn a lot your first year or two in the business, but What do you think was really valuable about the education that's helped you out?
I mean, you've got, of course, like the basic classic skills, like can you sketch and visually communicate really quickly? Illustrator was huge. So like even non-graphic things, like that's how we were building like technical drawings. But like big picture, it was that sort of like student mentality of just, I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure out how to do it. This like hope and excitement about product, and you're just like, you still love footwear. You're not one of like the old people that have been there for 20 years that are just like, it's another shoe. And it's like the like willingness to learn new things, I think was huge. And being on sort of maybe that more like forefront of new programs. I know a lot of footwear is getting excited about 3D. So like if you can learn Gravity Sketch and VR, like that's a new way to explore what footwear can be. So really kind of embracing the learning side of being a student was huge.
That's great. Anyone else have a thought on that one? Susan, you work with students all the time. And you're targeting actually the athletic fields. So what do you try and provide them with?
Well, I would say there are a couple important things with our program. One is that we really believe in interdisciplinary education. So we have many of our students that come into our program without design degrees. And we bring those students together to learn about design for products that they love. Like if you love sports product and the sports industry, it's a passion that you can't erase. It's something that you either have it or you don't. So that's one really important thing, is that innovation happens when intersections of different backgrounds come together to think. And so that's really important. The second thing is that learning by making is really important. It's critical to innovation. Until you can decouple a shoe and understand what a midsole, outsole, sock liner, upper, how it's made, how it's constructed, until you really can like do that on your own, it's really hard to innovate for performance. And so we really, in our program, we want our students leaving knowing how to do that. And we also do that in apparel and equipment as well. So our students are learning all three of those disciplines. I think the other thing is understanding the body and really understanding the market beyond the elite athlete. So a lot of companies are really focused on products for elite athletes, and those happen to often be male athletes. And my work and the work that I really, try to engage with my students is that they're athletes of other abilities and other sizes and other cultural experiences and needs, and that there are so many athletes that are underserved around the world that still haven't been designed for, right? I came into the industry designing for women because I grew up wearing sports product that was made for men. And still to this day, women's innovation in sports product is still very low on the totem pole at companies. So I think there's still a lot of work for us to do, and teaching new designers that it's not always about like the highest level football or basketball shoe. It's about all the other folks that want to engage in sport and wellness.
I think to go off of that point too, I try to tell students the more obscure of a project you can have in your portfolio, the better it can be, because I can't even count the number of like Air Force One projects that I've seen in portfolios, or basketball shoes or running shoes, but it's the shoes for zombie apocalypse. It's the shoes for parkour or scuba diving or walking on Mars that, yes, it's weird and maybe there's a little bit of a market, but it's not huge. But at the same time, I'm going to remember that a lot easier and a lot better And maybe don't make every project that different and out there, but you need to have like something that somebody's going to remember. I talked to this person about a year ago. I saw their oh, okay, zombie apocalypse designer. Okay, I remember they were cool, and let's go from there. And I think utilize the scope and scale of the University of Minnesota too. If you're interested in sports and you're truly interested in designing sport product or sport inspired product, then talk to the athletes that are at the school. Design a shoe for one of your co-eds. Design a shoe for an athlete that is at the school. They're going to love it because they want all athletes want a signature shoe. They want that thing, but just you know who the athletes are because you can see that they're in the team edition apparel and whatnot. And so just go up to them and say, hey, can I introduce myself and meet them, and can I design a shoe for you? And try not to have it be a basketball shoe or a running shoe, but think of some of the more obscure, undefined ones.
Terrific. We have so many good questions here. We are not going to get to all of them, and I apologize for that. But one that I know we've got folks interested in is how do you recommend getting a interview at a shoe company when there might be other folks who've got more specific or better internships on their records? Even if you're confident in your skills, how do you actually get that contact so that you can get heard or get your work seen? Chris or anybody? Ashley?
Yeah. So I'm in a super fortunate position that I've had the ability to recruit and make hiring decisions and influence that. And the best recommendation I can have is one, to be confident, and two, to be persistent. And you have to put yourself in a position to succeed. So I'll start with confidence. When I was a student, I was far too concerned with bothering people that I've never met, when the reality is it's on the ownership of the recipient of the email or the cold call to say no. So do not be afraid to reach out to alumni. Do not be afraid to reach out to people you see. Do it professionally. Have a plan in place. If they say yes, do not waste their time. But people will say no if they're busy or they're not interested, and that's okay. Two is to be persistent, and that is, if you do make a connection, follow up with people. I've had a lot of University of Minnesota students reach out to me. We have a great 30-minute, 1-hour conversation. Great. And then I actually don't hear from them again. Like it's so rare and such a heads up to have someone on the inside. When you see our internship applications come on, you can reach out to me. And I'm probably set myself up for failure here. I know there's a big group of panelists here, but I genuinely mean it because I'm someone who needed that help to get in. I assume Charlie did. I assume everyone here has, and you tend to pay it forward because you know how special the opportunity is. And then the third, I said, put yourself in a position to succeed. If you want to work in sportswear, there is no place like Portland or Boston or Maryland. If you want to go work at these companies, like I have so many friends who went to U of O, and I talked to them about the opportunities they had in college, and I'm like, wow, just being around where these things happen is such an advantage. And I know I'm talking to a group of students based in Minneapolis. I'm not saying transfer, but if you have time over the summer, see if you can set up the opportunity to come out here. People, like come see the campuses, set up some meetings. The opportunity to meet face-to-face is always going to be more meaningful than a call or an email. And of course, I know that takes resources and time, but if you're serious about it, like the people who succeed, it's because they combine those three things together. And then of course it's packaged with the talent, the hardworkiness, the organization, and the true passion and interest. So that's definitely my advice.
Great. Others?
I think that, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that was really well said. I think the other thing, if you're a student or even a professional looking to move into the industry, your first kind of entry point is the resume, right? And so really making sure that your resume has language that matches the job description and that you really are qualified for the job that you're applying for. Because often the resumes are matched in a qualitative search engine. And if your resume doesn't have the right language on it, you may not even get your portfolio looked at. And then if you make it through kind of that next portfolio stage, you want to have what Charlie said, you want to have that project. And I tell my students this all the time, you want to have the project that stands out. It needs to be really inventive and creative, but really kind of making it memorable.
Great advice. Let's see, we're almost out of time here. I'm going to paraphrase one of these questions. With all of the exciting collaborations going on in footwear, do you see footwear continuing to take on this more artistic, experimental approach? And to what extent does money factor into all of this? Ashley or Chris or?
I'm happy to talk about this only because I work on collaborations. I think collaborations have reached a high point of saturation where they're almost replacing a lot of the work that used to be built from what Susan discussed before, which is like inline. And it's becoming the new norm where you still need that foundational product, but now consumers are expecting collaborations. And if you were to look at a sneaker launch calendar by week across brands, there's something of significance dropping almost every single day. Now the evolution of that, and I think the question was, do we see it pushing to be more artistic? I think where I have observed, and of course that's just qualitative and quantitative data, is people are looking for collaborations that actually mean something. So that could be, how does the brand values of Nike, Adidas, Target, Timberland match the partner? If it's, you know, in harmony, that has value. Or does this partner bring something hyper local, hyper specific, hyper valuable to me? So if I grew up in Wisconsin and they're working with like a local hero, all of a sudden I'm far more invested in that project than if it's just another collaboration with PlayStation or Xbox, because those are just two big companies coming together. So it's kind of this rethinking of partnership of you can't just slap two things together and expect a greater outcome. The consumer has far too many choices today. They can spot like money chasing from a distance, and they'll call you out on it. Like, if the comments on the internet are brutal, and when everyone here works into product design, I've had good advice that they're never as bad as they say you are, and you're also never as good as they say you are. So being humble, not getting too caught up in internet culture is important. And I think the final part of that question is, does business drive that decision making? I can only speak from my experience, and the answer is yes. Like, everything that these companies do is built on a business decision, but the consumer is the person that drives where that business decision is placed. So if the consumer culture is saying, we value body inclusivity, we value sustainability, we value innovation, that drives the decision making of brands. And then we tend to invest against that. We try to be very consumer oriented. Of course, sometimes you do make decisions that are purely about driving bottom line or top line, but collaborations are a reflection of the demand of our consumer and something that we observe, whether that came from sneaker culture or high fashion or something completely different. It's always a reflection of our consumer.
Awesome. Guys, we are just about out of time. Is there anything any of you would like to add, especially to our first and second year sneakerheads who might be thinking about how they go through the next couple of years? Any words of advice that you haven't already given to them? Because you've offered up a lot.
I can jump in. I think, you'll be told by your professors and your counselors and advisors that networking is key. And I mean, the fact that Chris and I are on this call together right now is proof of that. Chris introduced me to people that introduced me to a senior designer in color materials, who introduced me to a design director in color materials. And when I came out to interview at Adidas, my first interview was with that design director that I had already talked to for an hour. And then my second interview was with that senior designer in color materials that I had already talked to for an hour. And so it's like I already interviewed with them and they're in my interview, and any advantage that you can get in an interview, take it, because a lot of people don't get any advantages in any interviews. So networking is key. I think my goals for networking was at the end of either at the very end of the conversation in your informationals or in your follow-up thank you email that you need to send. Ask for other people that they can introduce you to, and ask every person that you talk to for other people that they can introduce you to, because the chain just is infinite, and it can go on and on and on and on and on. And maybe not everybody that you're talking to is the job that you want. Maybe you're hearing things repeated, but at the same time, it's another person that you made an impression on, another person that made an impression on you. And I would say, yes, your thank you email is vitally important. Don't skip out on thank you cards too. Because like my interview at Adidas, I sent my first senior director. In that interview, I sent her a card saying thank you. And she still tells me to this day that she still has that. And, you know, I might have thought very little of it. I was just doing it as a formality, but it was clear that that made a point to her, and she keeps it. And that's pretty cool.
I have a stack of those cards that I have kept over the years. Great advice. I think that's about all we've got time for. We said we'd get you out of here in an hour. So to all those who we didn't get your question answered, please reach out to any of our panelists, and I'm sure they would love to do some networking and answer some more of your questions. Missy, any last words?
Absolutely. Panelists, thank you for joining us tonight. The conversation was great. And thank you all to our attendees. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you.